Welcome to Cube and Chaos. Spend some time with us, enjoying old cards and new, whether they are weak or powerful.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of Cube and Chaos. I'm Max.
And I'm Jacob.
We are here this week to talk to you a bit about what's going on right now on Arena in terms of Cube and things coming up in the future.
Lots of Cube this time, and also with a much more suitable recording time for Max, so it's not falling seat this time.
Instead, you are this time.
Well, I might be. Let's hope not.
Right. So do you want to start by talking about the Tinkerer's Cube?
Yeah, so it's the Tinkerer's Cube is a cube that is currently online on MTG Arena, and I believe it's just since this weekend, so it should be available quite a bit longer. And the cube feels I didn't play too much yet, but it states to be and also feels to be quite different than the last cube they had on Arena. And it's much less of a Goodstuff cube than last time. So they didn't just put all the most powerful spells available on the program into the cube, but designed a little bit more for synergy and archetypes. I mean, you still have a lot of the very powerful cards there, but there's a designated life gain deck that is supported much more than in the previous Magic Online cube, Magic Arena cube. And there's the self-mill archetype that I've seen, and the aggressive archetypes feel like they also have a little bit more built for synergy cards, and like green-white does something with +1/+1 counters and so on. So I definitely say you should play that. It's also relatively cheap on Magic Arena. It's just 4,000 gold or 600 gems. So yeah, you can gem quite a lot of it. I think it's probably still a losing game, but it's a very slowly game. It's a lot of fun.
You're talking about EV?
Yeah, it's obviously you won't be making money with it. It's best of one, sadly. I wish that weren't the case. I just love sideboarding in Cube, but yeah, we've talked about that before.
Yeah, I think sideboarding is a big part of Cube, but it sounds like despite not having best of 3, they're still taking some steps to try to create depth in the format, which is, I mean, that's pretty cool. Not something that I necessarily expected to see on Arena.
Yeah, the card that's done the most for me so far was Command the Dreadhorde, the sorcery that reanimates any number of creatures and or planeswalkers in all graveyards. That has been great for me. I think it's a very good card. I don't know, my first impression.
Yeah, it's a sweet one. Feels like it narrowly misses out on being playable in the Magic Online cubes, and I mean, it was solid if I remember correctly back in War of the Spark, but yeah, it sounds like this is a pretty nice home for that card.
Yeah, so then also on Magic Online, we will be getting some new cube formats again, or one new one at least. So they're bringing back the cube spotlights on the 9th of September.
And probably sometime in the next couple of days here, I imagine they'll be giving us an announcement about what the actual format's going to look like, who designed it, and so forth.
Even better, they at least said that they will be releasing an in-depth article by the designer, which I can't wait for. I really hope they do it this time.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
That didn't happen with Amaz's Cube, but it should happen this time, so I'm really looking forward.
Right, yeah. Amaz's Cube, I think that was the main one where we didn't have an article, but we wanted one. And it was also, I think, is probably my favorite Cube Spotlight, at least that I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, we're just suckers for Peasant Cube, right?
Yeah, but it was an especially good Peasant Cube at that, I think.
It was very good.
Let's see. Yeah, so coming up after that is Modern Cube. So Modern Cube, I mean, you have Vintage Cube on Magic Online, of course, the strongest kind of cube you can play, and then step down from that, you take out the Power 9 and a lot of the very, very strong cards in that cube, and you end up with Legacy Cube. And then, I mean, based on how power level has been going in recent years, you still have a lot of very, very strong cards in Modern Cube, but it just doesn't really play the same way as the other two cubes, in my opinion. I know that in the past, it used to feel very, very grindy. There were a lot of planeswalkers running around, but I think recently they have taken out some of those planeswalkers. They've tried to make games a little bit more reasonable and easier to manage. So yeah, I'm excited to see what they have for us this time.
Me too. This will, however, play into the time where they already have release events for Zendikar. What is it, Zendikar Rising? And yeah, so we will have to evaluate what we want to do more: play with the new cards or play with the cube. Both are so juicy.
Right. It's kind of a weird choice, in my opinion, to overlap those two events. Oh wait, I just realized we haven't made any plans to talk about Supreme Draft, which is like potentially the most important thing to be talking about right now.
Well, then let's do it right now. Supreme Draft.
Sure.
It's
Right.
suddenly dropped upon us, and I'll take that ahead of time. I don't like the name of it, but it certainly is interesting. I don't feel like it's supreme in any way, shape, or form, but it's different.
That's definitely true. Do you know anything about a draft format called Decadent?
No, how did that work?
So I called it a draft format, but I believe they're sealed as well. And so the idea behind the Decadent format is that you have a pack of cards, you take one card out of the pack if you're drafting, and then the pack is discarded. So this is something that I found out about pretty recently, and it made me kind of question whether Supreme Draft met the expectations that I had for it. Because one of the promises that Supreme Draft made is it was something that Wizards had never done before. It was mysterious, it was exciting, and technically it is different, right? Because with Supreme Draft you have the 2 picks per pack, but it is very, very similar to the Decadent format, which is something that has actually existed for a really long time. And even now, if you went onto like draft.info, you went to create a room, one of the types of drafts you could create is a Decadent draft. So
Yeah.
I was a little surprised, to say the least, that the Supreme Draft format was actually something that already existed apart from the 2 picks per pack rule.
In Decadent, how many packs do they draft?
I believe it's the same number of picks total. So instead of 18 packs and 36 picks, I think it's just 36 packs and picks.
So it's just a full display. That makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, the other thing I will say, the other like main criticism I have of Supreme Draft is it feels like you are almost drafting a cube in the sense that every single pick is going to be a really high power level. But
Yeah.
unlike a cube, there's no signal reading to be done. If you end up in a certain archetype, it's pretty much either because you're forcing or because you just took the most powerful card in every pack and ended up in some 3+ color control deck or just masterpiece, kind of depending on what you like to draft. So I think that a lot of players who like drafting really like being able to read signals.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, that's not, again, a strike against the Supreme Draft format so much as it is against just Decadent. But I personally found that the decks that are the highest number of colors always seem to be able to perform very strongly, because with
In
that,
Ravnica.
right. But same with Modern Horizons, because you're just able to make the 5-color snow deck or 4-color or whatever work so easily because you have so many picks that you can devote to snowlands. And unlike the original format, you're not competing with anyone for a snow forest. There's no reading, whether snow is open or whether like 5-color control in Ravnica is open. You can just take all the strong kind of payoffs for being this controlling multicolor deck and just pick the fixing very highly. No one's competing with you for it except for RNG, I guess.
Yeah. So what I feel like what it comes down to is that if the format is super well balanced, then you can draft whatever you feel like. You can decide before the draft, I will draft this, and then just try to make it happen. Staying open is not really a thing. Like for maybe 1 or 2 picks, you will try to stay open if the pack is not strong. But I've seen so many people who either just say, okay, that's 1 more round of snow and another round of snow, or a lot of people are also just doing ninjas,
right?
Which seems like it's also very strong and maybe interacts favorably with the snow deck.
Yeah, I've heard some people go so far as to calculate the odds of opening a particular rare and then saying, oh, well, with X% chance that I open Fallen Shinobi, if I just force blue-black ninjas, then, I mean, I might get one of the best cards in the format. So, that's a pretty decent incentive to do so.
So I would say that it is interesting, but gets stale very, very quickly. And it has the same problem that bots draft have on Magic Arena, and that is that it's not self-correcting at all. Like, if people come to the conclusion that you should only draft blue-black ninjas, then you will play the blue-black ninjas mirror match 3 times in a row. And
Right.
that's that. I don't know, that the format is like broken from the start. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I really like the comparison to the MTGA bot draft because there's another way that I feel it's very similar, and that is I find it kind of difficult if I'm doing a draft sim or if I'm doing a bot draft on Magic Arena, or if I'm doing a Supreme draft. I find it difficult actually to care about the picks. It's
Oh,
like, yeah, you're not waiting ever, which means you can just go through as quickly as you want without thinking about things. Unlike Magic Online, sometimes on something like Arena or just on a draft sim, there are no other people involved. Sometimes there are no costs to enter these things, and that means that it just feels like the stakes are so much lower. Of course, there is a cost to entering Supreme Draft on Magic Online, but I just find it difficult to care about what I'm doing and take my time with it when there's really nothing forcing you to do that.
It feels sure. But what do you think about it as a tool for 2 friends to test deck?
That's a really interesting idea. I think I would still rather have cards slowly leave the packs as people draft, but I think that makes a lot more sense. I think that you're able to kind of see what the maximum power of a certain archetype is if you're doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, I
that
think the
makes
power level will be a little bit higher than if you draft it naturally,
right.
but not by an incredible amount. And I think it could be like a very nice go-to tool if you have like one friend and want to playtest your cube, and you can say, okay, let's do this again. I'm drafting blue-green proliferate, and you are drafting black-green aristocrats, and then we go at it, and then we can playtest this matchup.
Right.
And see how the cards interact. And I feel like maybe the 36 packs is a little bit low, because in this way you will never have a real sideboard. But well, I mean, if people are testing for big tournaments, they often are also testing a lot of pre-board games. Maybe that's a nice tool in a cube designer's arsenal now.
As the person who made a cube where there were 12 card packs, I have to say 36 is a number I'm a fan of. But
yeah.
On a more serious note, yeah, I think you run into some problems where either you don't have enough picks to really pivot from one deck to another, or if you're just forcing something from the beginning, and again, there's not really any reason not to force, there's no deterrent from doing that, then you're going to end up with more than enough playables. So it's kind of in this weird spot where the number is wrong no matter which way you look at it.
Well, if you're also taking fixing, then often you don't have a lot of leftover cards.
That's true.
But yeah, I think it is interesting, but I'm not in love with playing a lot of it on Magic Online. But I will keep it in mind, and I think I will use it for playtest, sure.
Yeah, and going off of that testing, in terms of experimentation, I love this. I love that Wizards is opening up these crazy ideas to the Magic Online community. First, we saw like 2 first picks in double masters. Now we're just seeing this is kind of completely off the rails compared to that. I'm not sure whether I would necessarily call it a success, but I feel like the entire point of experimentation is trying something for the sake of seeing how it ends up. And I'm really excited to see that they're broadening their horizons, I guess, in terms of the kinds of experiences that players are going to be able to have. Again, of course, this is coming from the person who thought it would be a good idea to get rid of green from a cube and reduce pack size to 12, but I just think that experimentation.
Just new things. If something's new, it's exciting, at least for a while. And it's lovely that they give this opportunity, and they have the sets lying around, and just from time to time saying, oh, let's have a week of Supreme Draft of this and that format that we haven't played for a while. Is like, it's a nice change of pace from that time.
Right.
Great.
Okay, so one of the things that we very briefly alluded to earlier when we were talking about Modern Cube was Zendikar Rising. We're in the thick of spoiler season here. I believe we are about halfway through, and we're seeing these really kind of scary cards. I've heard some people speculate that the ones at higher rarities are insanely broken and they're going to warp constructed formats a la companions, but I'm not totally sure that I buy that. And obviously, I'm not really a constructed specialist. So we get to talk about those kind of modal cards in terms of things like Cube. I don't think they will be problematic in that sense.
Well, you decide if they should be or not, right? It's your cube.
Right. Yeah, there's no worries of a ban list when you're the one creating the format.
Yeah.
So what we are talking about is we're seeing cards that are double-faced, but unlike previous double-faced cards, these are not transform cards. They are cards that you can either play as a spell or you can play as a land. And I think all the lands enter tapped, and I think that the mythic ones allow you to pay 3 life, enter untapped, something like that.
Yep.
But there are also rare lands it's basically, I think it's like an untapped Evolving Wilds kind of thing, where you can either get one, like you can either say get a land that produces white mana, or on the other side you get a land that produces blue.
Yeah, basically, like it's a pre-fetched fetch land without shuffling if you want, like no double land drops, no shuffling. But I think it's much more in the spirit of when the fetch lands were originally created.
Right, and there were no. Well, I mean, I guess you still had like the original duels that you could get with those, but
for sure. But when they designed them for the standard at the time, the idea was you have a land and you decide for either color, and then you have that for the land for the rest of the game. And this new design of having one side is a red land that comes into play untapped, the other one is a white land that comes into play untapped, is just a very clean execution of that original idea.
Yeah, I agree with that. I really like the flexibility it offers. I like the reducing shuffling. I'm not sure exactly how relevant that will be in the near future, as almost all of us are playing online at this point. I think it's a cool idea, to say the least. I mean, it'll probably see standard play, right?
Yeah, I mean, for aggressive decks, I think they are kind of decent. Untapped fixing is something they so rarely get.
So in terms of the uncommon ones, I don't think we've seen any at common, which is probably a good thing. I think that would be kind of terrifying. But at uncommon, we have, those are the ones where it's either a spell or a tapped land. And I believe you likened those to basic land cycling. Do you want to talk a little more about that?
Yeah, so we had basic land cyclers available for a long time in many different formats, and I think they will play out relatively similarly. The basic land cycling, for example, from Onslaught, they had like forest cycling. It was like 5 and a green for a 4/5. It's also in the most recent master set. It taps for 3 green mana, so it's just a big creature that ramps you further, but it can also be forest cycled for 2 generic mana. And it means this is already like kind of a modal land and spell card. It's a little bit different. It does not come into play untapped, but you need to pay mana ahead of time. So if you are planning to fetch the land and play the land in the same turn, then it's basically a land that comes into play tapped and costs you another mana. Feels a little bit like that. But you can also have the flexibility of doing it at the end of their turn. And yeah, but I think they are similar in power level.
I do think that in terms of raw power level of the card design, I think the original cycle of the basic land cyclers are stronger cards for a couple of reasons. So one of the things that I've noticed, I think this is just a pretty consistent and good design idea that you see with things like Kicker, where it's like the expensive mode is overcosted by 1 mana. A lot of the original basic land cyclers nowadays, I would say, are overcosted by 1 mana. Like you have a 3/4 flyer, 4/5, 4/4 with fire breathing, a 3/6 vigilance, right? And then there's Twisted Avon, which is insane, but whatever.
Yeah, okay, let's not talk about that one.
Yeah. I think nowadays all those cards would be reasonable-ish at 5 mana, but back in the day at 6, like I think that 6 mana would have been fine back then. Things were just a bit worse, especially creatures.
Yeah.
But the main thing that I wanted to say though is I found that most of the flip cards now are pretty conditional. So they're usually overcosted by 1. They are also they require you to have a pretty specific scenario. So for instance, one of them is a fling effect. If you have a creature that you want to sacrifice to deal damage to something, then it's great. How often do you really want to put yourself in that 2-for-1 kind of situation? Not always. I mean, it's great in response to removal. It's great if you can end a game with it, but other than that, I mean, this like fling is not a card you always want to put in your limited deck. So
yeah.
I think that these are kind of inherently safer than a lot of the like basic land cyclers, which were just beefy creatures that would always be good.
Yeah, so what I want to say about that is I feel like this new cycle, at least for the uncommon, I have the feeling that they will be much more interesting from the gameplay perspective because they are so narrow. Whereas with the land cyclers, it was almost always, do I need to draw it early and need the land? Then it's a no-brainer cycling to get a land. And if you draw it late, then it's a no-brainer to just play the fat creature, because you have the mana already, and what do you want to draw? A fat creature. So that feels very powerful. And these new uncommons, like if you draw them in the middle of the game where you maybe need another land or maybe need this effect, I think it will have a lot more decision to it than these land cyclers. They were very clear cut in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that in a strong way. And I also think that in addition to having kind of a greater decision point, I think that there's more room in between where each mode shines, right? So with those original basic land cyclers, you either had a card that gets you a land, which was a totally solid card, or you had a beefy creature, which was a totally solid card. But here you either have a land, which again is totally solid, or you have this card that is sometimes good. And even if you have the lands to support it, it's not always going to be good, which then starts to make the card a lot more interesting, in my opinion, because it becomes tougher to evaluate exactly how often are you going to want kind of a mediocre spell, but a card that can help out your consistency in terms of being both a land or a spell versus just a very good spell. I think that kind of decision is going to be really tough to make because I don't think we're used to making it.
Yeah, I think it'll be very. And the gameplay also will be interesting, additionally because of landfall. Because playing the land might also give you a spell-like effect. Then you have a whole other decision to make. It changes with the board state completely. So I'm really looking forward to playing with these. And I think they will be appearing in cubes probably.
I remember correctly, Usman was one of the people who spoiled one of these flip lands, and yeah, he's a big cube designer and just aficionado in general. So I think the fact that it was given to him to spoil, it kind of shows that Wizards is expecting that, right?
Yeah, he spoiled both the Kazu's Fury as well as the Kabira Takedown, which is for 1 and a white and deals damage to the number of creatures you control to target short play.
Those two, I think, are my favorite of the flip ones so far for my Peasant Cube because the black-red deck cares about sacrificing things, so a fling effect fits right in there. And the Kabira Takedown is really nice in my white-green kind of go wide archetype, but also the white-black kind of aristocrats archetype too.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's also nice to see white having a damage-based removal effect that doesn't require the creature to be in combat.
Oh, yeah. I also noticed that. It's nice. Very nice.
So, Wizards recently gave us a bunch of information about what 2021 is going to look like, and I think this is pretty rare. Every now and then, they'll let us see a bit farther into the future than normal, but I mean, we have a pretty good idea of how the entire year is going to look in terms of releases, and I personally really like that. We get to see where everything is going, and speaking of, Modern Horizons 2 is coming. Is it a coincidence that right now the Supreme Draft format is Modern Horizons? No, I don't think so. Kind of reminds me of how right as Pioneer was getting announced, then we realized that the Chaos Draft format that we were playing all along was Pioneer Chaos, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, it's really fun.
But there are two main things that I want to talk about, which are going to be pretty interesting, given that the words paper only were used to describe each product. So you have above that line there, you have all the regular sets, if you will. Not to mention Innistrad being kind of cleaved into there, not something that we're used to seeing, but I'm sure things will make a little more sense there as we get closer to it. But below that line are the formats that the words paper only have been used to describe. And right now, I'm not totally sure that it's the best idea to release a paper only set. Like, I'm not sure how many people will realistically be playing with it, but more relevant to me in particular, as someone who plays Magic Online pretty frequently, is whether the term paper only includes or excludes Magic Online. So obviously from the term itself, it sounds like it would exclude Magic Online, but Modern Horizons in particular has been described as a paper-only product, Modern Horizons 2, and I cannot foresee a world where Wizards would not release Modern Horizons 2 on Magic Online. In the past, in terms of sets that they've released, like relatively recent sets, the ones they haven't put on Magic Online have been the unsets, and then the kind of wonky draft sets like Conspiracy. And I heard that Time Spiral Remastered would be coming to Magic Online. That's probably the one that I'm most excited about, out of maybe this entire calendar. Not only the idea of having some sweet new artwork and maybe some sweet old borders on some of these cards, but also the idea of one of the best draft formats ever being like rehashed. The idea that maybe they take Sprout Swarm out entirely, or maybe they upshift it to something like rare. I think that
I'd
this
prefer it completely gone, personally.
yeah, I mean, who wouldn't, right? No one likes that card. But I just think that, for those of us on Magic Online who have been missing those flashbacks to these older draft sets, I've been decently happy with the Cube Spotlights as well, but, would still appreciate those flashback events. I think Time Spiraled Remastered is going to be a gift. I think it should be a lot of fun to play. And yeah, we are pretty sure that it is coming to Magic Online.
Yeah, I can't wait. Time Spiral was the first set that I drafted a lot, or the whole block. And yeah, it will really strike a note, pretty sure. But I also already know that I will be disappointed of some of my favorite cards not being there, even if it's for good reasons. But I mean, I love some of them, even though I shouldn't.
I want to know what these cards are.
Well, for example, the what is it, Cyclops that kills itself when you play it. Cry 1, dude, 3/3.
Putrid? Yeah.
Putrid Cyclops, yeah. I never played it, but I just love seeing it because it just never works. And think, maybe I have to run it, then you don't. And then when your opponent plays it and it kills itself, I don't know. It's kind of funny, but it's just a terrible card and a terrible design that lures people into doing stupid things. So I'm pretty sure it will not be there, but I will be missing it.
It is a funny card. I remember trying to play that card back when I was new to drafting and card evaluation. And I was thinking, wow, 3 mana, 3/3, not bad. 3 mana Scry 1, specifically probably to the bottom. It's a bit worse. I think I played it at least 2 times.
I didn't. Somebody in my LGS at that time told me to never run that card, don't touch it. I'm very grateful, but I kind of forgot who it was. But I didn't figure it out by myself. Somebody had to help me out.
Yeah, it reminds me of like a kind of a riddle of lightning, but it's just so much more hit or miss. So to prepare for the Dungeons and Dragons set, we've seen this theme of, what is it? It's rogues, clerics, wizards, and warriors, if I remember correctly.
That's correct.
Yeah, and then we have Kaldheim coming up, which is the Viking set. So I'm not sure whether Vikings will be a subtype, but I'm pretty confident that we'll be seeing a lot of warriors in that set.
Yeah.
And we also have Strixhaven, which, I mean, School of Mages. It's funny because I was just thinking about building kind of like a Harry Potter style cube and decided that there weren't enough pieces for it. And it seems like Wizards has once again decided to kind of grant me the solution to my problems. I will see a ton of Wizards here. Not so sure about the rogues or clerics. I think maybe that means that we'll be seeing this last week a lot of those two show up in Zendikar Rising, maybe some rogues in Strixhaven as well.
Maybe, but I could imagine that this party thing that they are having in Zendikar Rising is more of a inset for limited thing, and then the better warriors and the better wizards will be then slotting later on in standard decks while not be played in standard up until those sets. I could see them exactly that. The rogues would fall off.
I guess going off of that, one of the themes that I'm pretty excited about is instant / sorcery / wizard, which we saw a little bit back in Dominaria. So this was, I mean, you had the blue-red wizard deck, which of course cares all about spells. You had like Adelise as maybe the strongest card in the entire archetype. And now with Zendikar Rising, we're seeing a few cards that care about instants or sorceries or wizards. So again, for my Peasant Cube in particular, I'm really excited because I already have a blue-red like instant or sorcery archetype. So adding kind of a wizard like sub theme there, I think will be pretty easy. I think it'll happen pretty naturally. And another thing would be like the red-green archetype with like power 4 or greater. I think warriors should fit in pretty well. Right now, there aren't a lot of cards that care about warriors in Zendikar Rising. I think there are at least 2 or 3. But regardless, I think by the time we get to Kaldheim, we'll probably be seeing even more warrior like enablers and payoffs. So I'm pretty excited about the direction they're going here. It seems like this 2021 is basically the year of subtypes, if I had to sum it up.
Yeah, it might, and they might keep it at minor, like tribal support. I don't think we will be seeing a second Lorwyn, but the minor is just enough for cube building anyway, right?
Right. I think that the minor themes are perfect for cube. At the same time, like, are we going to see another Lorwyn? They have 2 sets these are tentative names, but they have subtypes in the names of those sets, the Innistrad sets. So, I mean, I'm excited to see what happens, but I also do not understand how you would turn werewolves into, something that would support blue or black or white.
So I haven't seen this where this announcement came from for the schedule. I don't even know why they are then two different sets and what that is supposed to mean towards the end. But that's so far away. Like it's more than a year away. So I'm on the wait and see for now.
If I remember correctly, they said they had so much stuff they wanted to put into that set that they decided that one set wasn't enough. But it's also an interesting question for like how that'll be drafted on Magic Online and Arena if they come out at the same time.
Yeah, they probably have some great ideas fresh. I trust them to do that well.
I think so too. But yeah, a lot of looking forward into the future here. I started off looking forward under a week and ended up looking forward more than a year.
Oh yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Cube building your own again. So I was while hearing other people talk about their cubes, looking at cube lists, also because of the Tinkerer's Cube, I looked at the cube list, and I was thinking about what makes cubes feel like good. It's often tossed around like as a black and white thing, like either this is a good stuff cube or some people say this is a synergy cube or the streamlined cube or like something that is not a good stuff cube. And I was obviously it's a sliding scale, right?
You mean it's not just an Orzhov thing, not a black or white?
Yeah, exactly. It's not just an Orzhov.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it is a sliding scale.
And the question is then, can you identify what makes a cube into a good stuff? And I thought about a bunch of different things that go into that. And the first one I thought of is just the number of fixing available. So that's something that you play a lot with in your peasant cube in the limited as Garfield intended cube, where you restrict the fixing a lot. So maybe you can give a short reasoning for that again.
Yeah, so my cube, I originally was thinking that I wanted to have mainly streamlined 2-color archetypes, and then I thought more and more about it, and I realized that I wanted cards to serve very specific roles, which meant fitting into particular archetypes, which meant like an increase in synergy. And yeah, that meant even more emphasis on just playing 2 colors. Like it's definitely reasonable, and I wanted it to be reasonable to splash something. So like say for instance, you're in the black-red sacrifice archetype, but there's also like a hidden stockpile that you see and you think, man, this card is amazing in the kind of deck that I'm drafting. Like, yes, it's a 2-mana card, but it's still something worth splashing. So I wanted very specific roles to be filled, and I wanted 2-color decks to be pretty much where you're supposed to end up the majority of the time, which meant that I didn't think fixing was as important, and I actually took out every colorless non-land card as well.
Mm-hmm. So what happened is now you have 10 dual lands in 420 cards, and then a little bit fixing in green, right?
Yeah, green is the color with the most fixing. I'm looking for other ways to add fixing if it feels necessary. Like for instance, if the rare lands from Zendikar Rising were printed at uncommon, they would probably all make my cube. As is, I'm happy to just get some more kind of utility lands in there from that set.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the fixing was one thing that I looked. I have seen people also when cube spotlights were online, people complain that there's no fixing, or yeah, I don't know. So that's one thing. But they were, for example, I heard people complain about Amaza's cube that it didn't have enough fixing, but I also heard other people say, oh, it's just a good stuff. So that means that, I mean, the number of fixing is not the only thing that says if this is a good stuff cube or not. And I don't want to judge Amaza's cube here, but obviously there seems to be more of it. And then I was thinking, maybe it's just the number of designated archetypes, because that's also something that you can see that in your cube you have like 10 color pairs and all of them have something to do, and there are different cards for this type of archetype building. So you can have cards that slot nicely into multiple archetypes, but you can also have cards that really just go into one archetype. And as one of the example cards that I thought of, one of the type of cards were multicolor cards, since they are the signpost. They normally try to show off what this 2-color pair is doing, and almost all of the time they only fit exactly into this cube. So I thought maybe the number of different multicolor cards is something that goes against the fixing, or does it go further? So yeah, I don't know. It's a bit hard to say. Is it the number of archetypes that cancels out the number of fixing? Would you say that's the thing?
It's a good question. So you're saying like more archetypes you have, the more fixing you would need to maintain that ratio? Is that the idea?
No, I would say that both the number of archetypes that are supported as well as like that goes against the number of fixing in terms of good stuff. So if you go up in fixing, especially like fixing that anybody can take, you go up in the good stuff value, because everybody can splash everything, right?
You're saying if you go down in archetypes, then you're also going up in good stuff?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'm not sure if this is true though.
I think it probably is. Right now, there's a format called Venkman that I'm working on building my first kind of deck in. And yeah, there are virtually no archetypes, and it's just about purely a good stuff environment. So I think that what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
But then I also thought that there is a restriction coming from how the games play out. Because if aggro is very prevalent, then that punishes people going for good stuff. And that is something that we saw with the Cr4ckSh07 cube, which I felt was not a good stuff cube at all. And that was because aggro was so prevalent. There's a lot of fixing there. And yeah, aggro just keeps the good stuff in check. And not only in the gameplay, but also in the number of cards designated for that archetype. So then I was thinking maybe you would have something like the number of aggro archetypes among archetypes you have, aggro percentage or whatever, cancel out the good stuffiness.
Yeah, I think that makes sense too.
So yeah, there you have already like quite a few different levers that you can play on as a cube designer if you think that your cube is too dirtily for your taste, or maybe not dirtily enough, because I know many people just enjoy doing that where you grind and splashing everywhere, and I think it's also nice to from time to time get a change of pace. So with our small community, which you should really join us on our Discord and draft our cubes with us. Every time we play a different cube, it's exciting again. Like it's a different format and you need to adapt to the format, but you need to know where your cube should be, right?
Yeah, it feels like every time we draft in our Discord, there's a big learning experience. But I also think that just as designers, we do need to know where our cubes should be. Like, for instance, I think building a cube with the idea of, yes, this is a good stuff cube, or no, this is not a good stuff cube, I think that informs a lot of the design choices you make.
Yeah, and sometimes you start with some ideas and then it drifts into one direction, and then you need to think to yourself, do you want to embrace that, or do you want to stop here and develop it to another direction? But again want to say that there's definitely a room for both. And yeah, and the thing that I'm working on right now is I really hope that I will be able to find a way to put a number on this, like a good stuff coefficient, I called it in my first notes. But I'm not happy with anything yet. But these things we talked about, they will be appearing somewhere in there. But sometimes it's very hard to quantify it.
I look forward to seeing what you come up with in terms of being able to operationalize it.
Yeah, and I mean, it will be helpful for you while you are designing your cube, but it might also be interesting for the people who draft the cube. If they know like this is a 10 out of 10 maximum dirtly ranking, then they know what they're in for. Like, do they even want to draft this format, or how should they think about the first pack?
Yeah, in addition to that, I think it would be nice to see that kind of thing I don't think this will necessarily happen, but if Wizards did that kind of thing, like, for instance, they put on Supreme Draft, like, this is probably about as dirtily a format as you will play. I mean, it would be nice to have that expectation going in.
Yeah, it would be. And different values that people put onto their cubes. Like, I heard a bunch of talk about power level classification of your cube, which comes up most often between cube designers when they want to recommend cards to one another. But I think it's less useful for the player, because when you open your first pick pack, you would take the most powerful card in there probably, right? And you don't need to know if that is the only a medium power level card compared to the whole cube, or not, you would probably take the most powerful card, right?
Right. So with that, do you want to move on to signature spellbooks?
Oh yeah, so maybe you want to explain it first.
Yeah. So with signature spellbooks, this is something that I saw from Jim Davis. I don't think it was originally his idea, though I'm not sure whose it was, so I can't credit them very easily. But pretty much the idea is try to come up with a small set of cards as if you were the planeswalker for the signature spellbook. Cards that
Wait,
are
I am not the planeswalker.
I know. I
Ah,
didn't want you to
Right.
find out this way, but unfortunately, no. We're all real people, and we have to live responsible lives.
okay, so but if I were a planeswalker, I would come up with
Right,
spells.
exactly. If you were a planeswalker, then yeah, you come up with the spells that are most significant to you, the cards that distinguish you from other players, the ones you're sentimental about. Yeah, you try to totalize yourself with Magic cards.
Okay, so you made me think about this, which was a lot of fun, and I probably forgot a lot of things and might change my spellbook around, but I have right now, well, I already cheated. I'm having a land in here. Is that okay? It's called a spellbook and I have a land.
I mean, nowadays spells can be lands. Like,
Yeah, yeah, that's true. This one is not though. I don't know if it's the best one to start with, but I have Terramorphic Expanse on in my spellbook. I just like the effect. I mean, the shuffling is a little bit annoying, but if you play digital, it doesn't come up. It does not have the big, yeah, I would almost call it political debate of reprinting or not reprinting that other fetch lands have. And I just like the power level more of this card. It's just a land, comes to play, you tap it, sack it, and search your library for a basic land, put that into play tapped. And it's been out for a long time, has been reprinted a bunch of times. I mean, there's also Evolving Wilds, which is the newer version of that. But Terramorphic Expanse being from Time Spiral, my original heavy draft set, made me choose it here.
yeah, I mean, I think that says a lot about you as a player. Just already, Terramorphic Expanse, like, why not Evolving Wilds? Well, there must be some emphasis on some older set. And yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like a limited staple. Like nobody, or basically nobody ever played that instructed. I am a limited player at heart, for sure.
Right.
And it even shows up in relatively powerful formats, cube draft formats, or in master sets. And it's not a card that people completely despise. Like it gets taken. At what point depends on the power level, but people play it and can be nice, and it can even have a lot of synergy, like all fetch lands can. So I love it. And well, then the card I maybe should have talked about first. I mean, I named myself after this card. Less so because it ever got cast anywhere. It's Ishi Aki Crackshot. It's a weird one from Kamigawa. It's one in the red for a 1/1 goblin. I think I should know if it has another creature type. Maybe it's a warrior. And it's a rare, and it punishes people for playing their spirits or arcane spells. Every time an opponent plays a spirit or arcane spell, it deals 2 damage to that player. Yeah, it's a warrior. I was right about that. But I fell in love with the card because of the Christopher Rush artwork and also the flavor text. Yeah. The flavor text is here fell Ishi, king of the flaming pebbles, scourge of the mountain kami, lover of goats. May his shell never burn. Cave inscription. And I love this flavor text. It's a whole story wrapped in a few short sentences, or 2 sentences. It starts strong, then it's funny, and then it's sad. I don't know. I think it's one of the best flavor texts of all time.
Yeah, it's really a whole roller coaster in just a couple sentences.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an asymmetrical, like pyrostatic pillar whenever a player plays a spell from Kamigawa. And I didn't know that this was your namesake. That's a fun detail.
Yeah, it is. So I was playing a little bit kitchen table Magic when original Kamigawa was out. I started by buying my first boosters from Fifth Dawn, and then after that was Kamigawa. So yeah, it stayed with me. And at some point, I was looking for a name for myself in Unreturned in 2004. I was a teenager, so the lead speak was a must. I love this card, and also calling yourself a crackshot was also something that I kind of liked. So yeah, I stuck with the name, even though it's childish back. But I mean, I love this card a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the thing about childhood, right? It may be embarrassing to be associated with it, but at the same time, like that's, where nostalgia comes from, a big part of it.
And it's you, like, just embrace it. I don't know. I feel like a lot of people in our community feel the same way about things. Like, we're not ashamed of who we are, right?
No, I don't think so. I think a lot of people get into Magic pretty young and then they just never leave. Some people quit and then come back. It's not really a children's card game.
Yeah, then that made me think of another card from Kamigawa that I was fascinated with. I never owned the card, but I saw it on spoilers, and yeah, I was fascinated with Fumiko the Low Blood, and it's also from Betrayals of Kamigawa, also a red rare for 2 red. It's a 3/2 legendary human samurai, and it's just a very interesting design because it's aggressive, defensive. What is it even? It has Bushido X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. So that could be your creatures or your opponent's creatures. And it has the line, creatures your opponent control attack each turn if able. So this card, it makes the opponent attack, and then it can just block their creatures because if they have a lot of creatures, the Bushido value gets quite high. Or if you would attack with it, they probably don't have any blockers. And even if they do, they probably won't be able to block this because it has such a high Bushido value. And I don't have much experience playing with it, but somehow this card fascinated me as a very young player. And I still think it's interesting. And they had it in, they reprinted it in some Commander sets. So I think there must be some power level there.
Yeah, that makes sense. That kind of mass effect. I mean, affecting each opponent too in Commander. But yeah, even just in something like Limited, it seems like the kind of card where you play it, you're going to take some damage maybe if you're not able to block everything your opponent has profitably, but probably also eating at least one of their creatures thanks to that Bushido.
It probably plays like that. You play it, the opponent has to attack, eat one, take some damage. Then you would either start racing or you keep eating their creatures, whatever is more open for you. And I think it's always good. You still have choices, so I think
it's a nice, interesting card.
Then I have a card that's maybe a little less interesting, but I just somehow always loved it in every form it was in, and it's just Wishcoin Crab, or as I call it, Wincoin Crab, and it's 3 in a blue for 2/5 vanilla creature. I love it. It just blocks so well, and the 2 power is just enough to, well, in quotation marks, finish the game out quickly. Once you have full control of the board. I just like playing controlling decks, and sometimes blue's drafted heavily. I value this card higher than other people, so I often end up with quite a few of them. And they also just play nicely together. Just having 2 of them in play like, so nicely stalls out the board. And at some point, you will draw the removal spell for the opponent's creatures, and then you can start attacking. I love the card.
Yeah. I'm not super surprised to see a card like this on your list. If you remember, on mine, I had Wild Cr4ckSh07, which is definitely more of an attacking card, but also kind of gets wrecked by the crab.
Well, I think they stare at each other for a while.
The crab is happy to stare. The Cr4ckSh07, that's not what it's known for.
Oh yeah, that's true though. Maybe that's why the Wishcoin Crab's so much better. Blue creatures.
I was gonna say, in this last Chaos season, I drafted a lot of 4-mana 2/5s and noticed a few things. One is I pretty reliably was able to pick them up late, which to me meant that other people were undervaluing the 4-mana 2/5 body. Again, kind of going back to the Cr4ckSh07, I think that people just don't like playing vanilla cards. They think that cards need to have words on them to be good, and that's just not always the case. I mean, it is like a totally serviceable card, right?
It can attack. It doesn't have defender. And I have finished out games with it, and when that happens, it's so unexpected that it sticks with you, and that's why I coined that name for it.
For sure.
And then the next card is a card, well, again, with a lot of words. And I have very vivid memories of it being in my pre-release deck of Future Sight, or in multiple decks. It was actually one pre-release where there were midnight draft, and then throughout the night there were drafts, and then in the morning there was sealed. And I don't know, I was very high on Magic. And yeah, Nakatl Warpride is for 3 greens for 6 mana, a 3/3 Cat Warrior. And it must be blocked by exactly 1 creature if able. And when it attacks, put X tokens into play tapped and attacking that are copies of Nakatl Warpride, where X is the number of creatures defending player controls. Remove the tokens from the game at end of turn. So yeah, this card has a lot going on. And I feel like, especially at the midnight drafts, people were a little reluctant to read 6 mana 3/3 creatures. So I think this thing was going a little bit later than it should have been. And it certainly has a lot of power level. So the way it plays out is, well, if they have removal, they kind of got you. Paid a lot of mana for something that's relative kill. But if they don't, then you are in the situation that you are often in with this. If it attacks, then they have to block it, whatever cards. But this is actually a little bit different, because if they attack you, if you don't have good blocks, it means they will take 3 damage per attacking creature. That's a lot. And even if they don't attack you, and you attack with a Nakatl Warpride, they will take at least 3 damage, because you will create Nakatl Warprides equal to the number of creatures they have. So, and each one has to be blocked by exactly 1. So there's no like all of them block 1 and the rest goes through. It will always happen the exact same way. You will deal them 3 plus 3 for each tapped creature they control, and all their creatures take 3 damage that were blocking. And all your other creatures get through also.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. This card is completely insane. When you were talking about this card going later than it should, I was thinking, what, second pick? Like,
no, it was going like 5th pick or something like that. I mean, it's not easy to cast, and back in the day, you drafted the new set last.
Right.
So yeah.
It's just a disgusting card. It reminds me a lot of Kessig Cage Breakers, if you remember that one.
Yeah, it's a 5 mana 3/4, right? And it creates 2/2 wolves for what number?
The number of creature cards in your graveyard. But yeah, the Nakatl Warpride. I mean, also you didn't mention, like, if you have a combat trick, like they block your 3/3.
Or a removal spell for the one that's on the original copy.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the same thing. If you attack with this thing, you're probably winning the game, and especially if you get to attack multiple times. This is a card I'm actually not hoping to see in maybe we'll see it as like a mythic or something in Time Spiral.
No, it can be as a rare. It's fine. It would show up from time to time. It's a 6 mana play, and if the opponent has removal, then you are looking dumb. They have to have the removal, but I think for a 6 mana card, I think that's okay.
I think rare is reasonable-ish. Yeah.
Also, and I like to see it from time to time, but it's like a super strong card. It can make games very one-sided. But what I also remember is that I loved that I was still a new Magic player, remember that. It was not quite obvious to me, but it was synergizing nicely with my Herdnar, which was not the greatest card in the set. So Herdnar is a 4 mana 2/2 green creature, and whenever another creature comes into play under your control, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Which means that if you attack with a Herdnar and this Nakatl Warpride, the opponent is taking 5 damage plus another 2 for each creature they control. So they're basically always dead.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way of putting it.
And yeah, the Herdnar was not one of the greatest cards in the set, but together with it was really a nice combo. Yeah, just stumbling across that during pre-release and feeling so smart about it. I don't know. I remember that vividly. So the next one is again a creature, but it's very different creatures anyway. It's another green one. It's Skewed Mob. For 1 green, it's a 1/1. It's a rare from original Zendikar. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 5 or more lands, put 4 +1/+1 counter Skewed Mob. And I love that card when I saw it on the spoiler back in the day, and I was imagining the idea of how cool this would be as a finisher in a land go, like draw go style control deck, almost mono blue. And at some point where you have the mana already, you just play this Skewed Mob for 1 mana, and then it finishes out the game quickly. I think nobody ever had much success with doing that in Constructed, but somehow this thinking about it that way was so fascinating to me. Thinking about it as a basically blue card, that it kind of stuck with me. I mean, maybe there would have been a space for it if there wasn't Tarmogoyf, which was just like a few sets earlier and basically doing the same thing, being less fragile while doing that. But I don't know. I like the Cute Mob.
Yeah, it's a nice one. It's like one of the 2 really good reasons to be in green in original Zendikar draft.
They basically reprinted it in red, like in stronger way. There's this
Dragon Master
Caller or something like that. Yeah, Dragon Master Outcast or something.
Yeah, I think so. That's the one that makes 5/5s if you have 5 or more lands. Oh,
yeah.
Now I remember. I was gonna say, like, in original Zendikar, if you had like turn 3 or 4 like Harrow after the Scoot Mob, and then suddenly, like, triggering it a turn earlier is super nice. So
Yeah,
that's probably a game you're winning.
it was for sure a limited bomb. Like, not in the way that it would stabilize you, but it's so cheap and hits so hard that it can't really fall into that bomb category.
Yeah, and this is even in the format where, like, you don't really play 1-drops that attack for 1. Like, this is a format where you play 1-drops that attack for 2. So the fact that this thing that turns into a huge threat later in the game was still good, I think, speaks volumes to its power level. Okay, well, I think we covered all of our bases this time.
Yeah, except that we should say that you have a video on your YouTube where you talk about your signature spells. And if you are interested in mine and want to learn a little bit more about Max, you should for sure check that one out. And it's even more spells than I had.
Yeah, I believed the original number was around 8, maybe 9. So I just tried to do. I was kind of running low by the end, but I tried to do a bunch. But yeah, my main reason for doing this is not because I want to tell people all about the cards that are special to me. It's because I think it's a really cool kind of exchange rate of like memories of playing Magic. And I think that it's a good way to get to know like people who maybe you know them, but you don't know like what their experience is like with Magic. And like just from this list, I can tell that you have a lot of fondness for like Time Spiral, right? Or even like Kamigawa. Like Jacob was saying, if you liked this, if you want to share what cards are important to you, I'm sure we'd love to hear it. If you want to join the Discord, participate in some of our custom drafts, I think that'd be sweet.
And also, we will be talking about the Spotlight Cube that will be coming up also in detail. We will be sharing our first impressions, our broken deck lists, or maybe our complete failures of deck lists. That I think most of the time they're on those both ends. Like the middle of the pack decks often don't get shown, but the real train wrecks or the real amazing decks they get talked about quite a bit.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Even though we're not that big of a group, a lot of people are very active, and it's lovely. Lovely that you all joined us.
And we'll see you next time.
And in the queues.
Thanks for listening. Happy cubing.
Bye-bye.